If Baldur's Gate 3 left you with that existential void after the credits rolled, like, okay, so what do I play now that comes close to this? Then stick with me. Because it's not just about turn-based combat or dice rolls. It's about choices that actually change everything. Characters that become your second family, and that delicious feeling of creating your own story. And the good news is that 2026 is packed with new games trying to fill that space. So today, I've set aside 10 new games you need to know about if BG3 was your addiction, and I'm warning you now, there's stuff here that could become your next obsession. I'm Matthew, and the video starts right now.
I know the other mages haven't, but I'm not like the other mages. I see everything.
Solasta II is the kind of CRPG that anyone who fell in love with Baldur's Gate 3 needs to at least put on their radar, because it also embraces that tabletop vibe, but with an even more direct focus on tactical combat and rules without so many frills. It enters early access on PC on the 12th of March 2026, so it's the kind of game you can follow as it grows and becomes more fleshed out over time. The world of Solasta II is Neokos, a new continent full of mysteries and political conflicts where a dark force led by Shadwin threatens everything. The cool thing here is that you don't start as an unknown hero, but as a group of adopted siblings bound by a tragedy that reunites them to face this threat. This personal connection between characters creates a campaign that feels closer, more human, even amidst epic battles. The gameplay is focused on exploration, tactical combat, and decisions that truly impact the outcome of battles. You can explore freely, climb walls, jump over chasms, and even use the verticality of the environment to your advantage, something that gives combat a whole new dimension. The surprise systems, stealth, and weapon enhancements add layers of strategy that go beyond the basics, requiring you to think about every move. Solasta II doesn't try to compete with Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of cinematic narrative or dialogue packed with choices, but it compensates with a pure tabletop experience, where the focus is on combat, character building, and tactical exploration. If you like assembling creative builds, planning strategies, and diving into challenges that require patience and reasoning, this is the ideal game. It's like having an invisible dungeon master guiding your campaign, but with the freedom to create your own path. The game delivers a sense of discovery and conquest that few manage to achieve. Every battle, every encounter, and every decision makes you feel like you are shaping the group's destiny, not just following a ready-made story.
Sometimes I ask where the stars have gone. Are they hiding from my eyes at dawn? Fading from view, they disappear. I am blind.
Warhammer 40k. Dark Heresy is the new CRPG from Owlcat that will drop you right into the heart of the Inquisition, in a universe where horror, betrayal, and fanatical faith are the rule. The game casts you as an acolyte of the Inquisition, a secret agent investigating conspiracies, heretics, and warp threats in the depths of a hive planet called Sibelius, an immense, chaotic place where millions live in slavery, corruption, and filth. Here, it's not just about killing monsters, but gathering clues, questioning enemies, uncovering political and religious schemes, and making decisions that can change the fate of an entire city or lead you straight to the pyre for heresy. The gameplay is a mix of heavy narrative and turn-based tactical combat, where every position, every action, and every ability truly matters. The location targeting system is brutal. You choose where to shoot or strike, and a well-placed shot can disable a strong enemy, break weapons, or even kill instantly, while a poorly executed attack only serves to annoy the monster. It's that type of game that demands patience, strategy, and a bit of luck with the dice, just like the best tabletop campaigns. Warhammer 40k doesn't try to sell you just ultra heroes, but rather the paranoia, corruption, and madness of the universe. You aren't just a hero. You are an instrument of the Inquisitor, stomping on the necks of heretics, mutants, and demons, often committing terrible acts in the name of the greater good. It's the kind of RPG that makes you reflect. At what point do you become worse than the enemies you hunt? If you want to play Baldur's Gate 3, but with more exploding eyeballs, tanks, plasma weapons, and a tactical system that actually demands you think like an Imperial security agent, Dark Heresy is one of the most exciting upcoming CRPGs in the queue. This game is made for those who love dense atmospheres, painful choices, and tactical combat that keeps you glued to your chair, fighting for every inch in a universe where the light is always dim and the shadow is very, very long. Shadow of the Road is a narrative-focused, turn-based RPG that mixes feudal Japan with magic and machines, a steampunk touch, and the charm of it for those who loved Baldur's Gate 3 is precisely the promise of choices, a well-characterized party, and tactical combat that requires reading the field and planning. It is scheduled for PC and has been marketed as a story-driven experience, with a diverse cast and a campaign where your decisions shape the fate of the Empire. So you can already feel that CRPG vibe of living the adventure your way, just in a setting very different from traditional European fantasy. The premise hooks me because it puts you in 1868 Japan, in the middle of a country torn apart by civil war. On one side, traditionalist forces linked to the Tokugawa shogunate. On the other, the emperor with a technologically advanced army. This tension of tradition versus modernity isn't just background noise. It seems to be the emotional engine of the world, with ancient temples and codes existing alongside and clashing with technology and more industrial weapons, which opens space for moral dilemmas in the style of There Are No Clean Choices. In the story, the mission begins with a spy master linked to Tokugawa recruiting two Ronin, Satoru and Akira, to protect a mysterious boy with immense and unstable powers. This type of hook is great because it sets the group in motion with urgency while giving room for that drama good CRPGs know how to do. Wounded people trying to regain honor, making decisions out of loyalty or survival, and in the process, rewriting the course of the conflict. The combat promises to be turn-based with a samurai tactical feel, with each member bringing their own skills and with personal relationships and goals influencing encounters. This, for me, is the detail that brings the game closest to what so many people enjoyed in BG3. It's not just about having a build and rolls strategy, it's making your team feel like a real team, with friction, trust, bonds, and consequences appearing the moment the blade meets the target. If you enjoy party-based RPGs and want to step out of the obvious elves, dwarves, and taverns into an alternative historical fantasy full of yokai, espionage, and civil war, this is the kind of title worth following starting now because the setting alone promises to yield memorable stories. Afterlight is a tactical turn-based RPG focused on party and choices that takes the party-based energy many loved in Baldur's Gate 3 and throws it into a sci-fantasy universe full of factions, bizarre technology, and cosmic dangers. It is planned for release in 2026. And the proposal is to let you create your own hero and live a long campaign with that delicious feeling of my party is my story Except, instead of swords and dungeons, you'll deal with space stations, strange planets, and threats in the void. The narrative hook is very good. Your captain disappears mysteriously, and you need to gather a crew to face a crisis that could destroy the Pact Worlds. This type of premise works for me because it starts with an emotional void. The captain is gone, someone failed, someone lied, and becomes fuel for difficult choices, dangerous alliances, and that sweet CRPG paranoia where you can never trust anyone 100%. The combat seems to aim directly at those who enjoy real tactics. It uses Paizo's 3-action system, the same philosophy that made Pathfinder 2nd Edition famous, which usually means turns with a lot of freedom. You can move, attack, use an ability, reposition, and improvise, instead of being stuck in a rigid sequence. And since the game pulls from Starfinder, the promise is that classes and creation options matter a lot, with different builds genuinely changing the way you face every encounter. What catches my attention the most is the focus on the crew. The idea is to have companions with their own stories, moral dilemmas, and evolving relationships, and yes, even romances, if you want. This is the glue that makes a game like this become an addiction, when you aren't just optimizing numbers, but protecting a character because she saved you in a mission, or bringing someone on a specific quest because her lines and reactions completely change the tone of the scene. For those who left BG3 missing that combination of exploration plus choices plus well-seasoned turn-based combat, Afterlight looks like the obvious next stop, especially if you want something less medieval and more Guardians of the Galaxy meets tactical CRPG. The expectation, based on what has been released, is to have a public demo in 2026 and for the game to hit early access the same year, so it's one of those projects worth following early if you want to jump in with the community and watch the meta be born. Aether Iron is a narrative RPG with tactical combat that swaps swords and fireballs for smuggling, gangs, and armored cars in an alternative 1,930 seconds New York. It is scheduled for 2026 and already draws attention for mixing a noir deco-punk atmosphere with dice rolls and narrative branches like a tabletop CRPG but on the asphalt or floating roads. The setting is one of the best hooks. The game reimagines New York in a deco-punk style where Aether, a new energy source, allows part of the city to float above the clouds, creating a brutal social separation between uppers and lowers. This, for me, already sells half the experience because it's the kind of world that automatically generates good conflict. Those on top literally live in another reality, and those below pay the bill. Perfect for an RPG that wants to put you in dilemmas and force you to pick sides. The protagonist is a smuggler named Gia trying to survive in this hostile environment, and the story involves her meeting a young scientist from the uppers, which pulls the game into intrigue, social tension, and unlikely partnership. What I like about this premise is that it doesn't rely on saving the world right off the bat. First, it hooks you on the personal, the dirty, the dangerous day-to-day, and when the plot escalates, you are already emotionally invested. On the gameplay side, the differentiator is tactical combat centered on customizable vehicles, with turn-based battles and a clear focus on preparing the car as if it were your combat character. The narrative choices are tied to dice rolls and a skill system that also influences what happens outside of combat. Dialogue, risky actions, investigations. Creating that classic CRPG loop, you specialize in something and start seeing new exits or new trouble in the world. If your thing in Baldur's Gate 3 was thinking, okay, I'm going to own the consequences of what I chose and enjoying a group of characters reacting to what you do, this game has everything to deliver a different experience in theme, but very similar in feeling. If you thought the decisions in Baldur's Gate 3 were heavy, The Way of Wrath is the game that promises to make you break a cold sweat, but for a different reason. Here, the clock is your worst enemy. The game puts you in the role of a tribal chief in the Bronze Age who has just lost a war and has exactly 10 days to prepare their people for a final invasion that will decimate everything. The pressure is real and constant, and there's none of that. I'll explore the whole map and come back to the main quest later. Every day you spend hunting for resources or resolving internal fights is one less day strengthening the fort. The setting is a very welcome breath of fresh air in the genre. Instead of arcane magic and medieval castles, we have shamanism, blood rituals, ancient gods, and the rawness of prehistory. You feel the cold, the hunger, and the desperation of your people on your skin. The survival mechanics aren't just decoration. If your warriors are starving or freezing when the final battle comes, they will fight poorly. This forces you to be a real leader, balancing group morale with the purely logistical need to stock food and firewood. The tactical combat is brutal and requires you to know exactly who is fighting by your side. Unlike BG3, where you have heroes with defined classes, here you are molding ordinary people, transformed into warriors by necessity. The choices of how to equip them and what tactics to use depend heavily on what you managed to scavenge in the previous days. If you failed to get metal for weapons, you'll have to make do with wooden spears and traps, which completely changes the strategy. But where it really shines for fans of dense RPGs is in internal diplomacy. Your people aren't a uniform mass. There are factions, rivalries, and people who simply don't agree with you. Settling a dispute between two hunters might seem small, but if it guarantees loyalty in the final battle, it could be the difference between victory and massacre. It's this level of narrative micromanagement that makes you feel invested. When the invasion finally arrives on the 10th day, you aren't just moving figures, you are trying to save people you know by name. The Way of Wrath, scheduled for 2026, is that indie gem that captures the essence of consequence we love in big CRPGs. It swaps the epic scale of saving the universe for the desperate intimacy of saving your family and friends from a certain end. If you want an RPG where failing is a real possibility and the story is shaped by your effort against time, put this title on your list right now. If you fell in love with the vibe of a living city, messy choices, and a protagonist who is a walking disaster in the mold of Disco Elysium, Esoteric Ebb is the kind of game you need to know after Baldur's Gate 3. It is an isometric CRPG inspired by D&D tabletop sessions, but with a very peculiar touch. You are the cleric, just another civil servant in the city of Norvik, with zero pomp and an incredible talent for making any situation worse. The promise is an adventure where being a hero matters least, and what matters is what you choose to be in this electoral chaos. The story begins with an explosion in a tea house in the city center, and you, the cleric, are sent to investigate what is supposed to be a simple, bureaucratic job. But Norvik is in crisis. On the eve of the first election in its history, and what looked like a case of sabotage quickly turns into a political, economic, and even magical conspiracy, with factions fighting for power and an entire city vibrating with the election campaign atmosphere. The vibe is arcane-punk, half fantasy, half futuristic bureaucracy, and the crowded city environment, with shops, bars, alleys, and an underworld full of mysteries, is exactly the kind of setting that leaves you feeling that every NPC could be an ally, a spy, or a maniac. What grabs me most in Esoteric Ebb is that instead of a team of heroes, you are alone in the center of a living city with a goblin helper, and the full weight of decisions falls on you as a person. The dialogue system is huge, full of crazy branches, irreverence, and that humor of someone who has accepted that the world is a gigantic mess. You will embarrass yourself, be called incompetent, try to pass as a spy and get caught, but you will also manage to use magic, blackmail, intimidation, and even tabletop logic to uncover secrets. The feeling is exactly that, playing a tabletop RPG session with a DM who loves chaos and dead-end dilemmas. Encounters, including combat ones, are resolved using a branched dialogue system with turns instead of rolling a battle map. You have actions, hit points, and the die decides if your crazy plans work. You can cast a grease spell, make an enemy slip off a roof, or try to mind control the head of the guard, and all of this becomes a menu of tactical choices, as if combat were a last resort for a bureaucratic cleric. Progress isn't just a traditional skill tree mode, but something called a mission tree, which mixes a quest journal, mind map, and feat system, changing how you play according to your choices. If what you loved in Baldur's Gate 3 was the feeling that every choice reverberates, that the world reacts, and that your character can be a jerk, a philosopher, or a clown, Esoteric Ebb seems made with exactly that energy. It swaps the cast of legendary heroes for a normal guy, and a bit incompetent trying to get by in the middle of politics and conspiracies, and the result is a game that feels like a D&D disc, with its own soul and the kind of experience you'll want to tell your group of friends about, sentence by sentence, as if recounting a legendary tabletop session. Look, if you spent hundreds of hours in Baldur's Gate 3 making persuasion checks, deceiving NPCs, and feeling that every choice really mattered, zero parades. For Dead Spies will give you that same thrill, but now in a surreal and psychological espionage setting. This narrative RPG puts you in the role of Herschel Wilk, codename Cascade, a tormented spy with a failed past who needs to rebuild her network of contacts and unravel a conspiracy in a city where every conversation can be fatal. It's the kind of game where you don't wield a sword, but your words and decisions are weapons as deadly as any magical blade. What really connects this game to the BG3 experience are the skill checks and dice rolls that decide your fate in real time. You know that tension of rolling a d20 to convince an enemy or uncover vital info? Here, it works similarly, but with a mechanic called dramatic encounters, where time literally stops and you need to make critical decisions at the risk of death. The game also gives you a system called Exert, which works like advantage in D, and D you roll a third die and keep the two best results. But this comes at a strategic cost, affecting Herschel's anxiety and other attributes. Now, if you enjoyed how your abilities in BG3 opened unique dialogue options and creative solutions, get ready, because in Zero Parades your own skills literally talk to you. It's an evolution of the concept from Disco Elysium applied to espionage. Every skill in your head has a personality and gives you advice, not always good, on how to handle situations. The conditioning system replaces the old thought cabinet, allowing you to reinforce traits that modify your skills and perspectives, creating a unique Herschel based on your choices. It's basically like creating your perfect build. But here, the build affects not just combat, but the entire narrative and how you read people. The game promises that narrative depth with multiple branching paths where the developers want you to live with your mistakes. It's not a game about quick reloading when you fail a roll. The concept of failing forward ensures that even your failures lead to significant and interesting consequences for the story. Your choices affect the loyalty of your contacts, the available paths, and even the protagonist's mental fragility. If you spend hours pondering decisions in BG3, thinking about the consequences, here you will have that same weight, but with an extra layer of espionage paranoia where every informant can betray you. Zero Parades is scheduled for 2026 and brings a top-down perspective focused on exploration, dialogue, and investigation through the city. If you were one of those who fell in love with Baldur's Gate 3, mainly for the feeling of a living world, full of dangerous regions, rival factions, and a combat system that mixes RPG with tactics and action, there is a game down the road you simply need to have on your radar: Gothic 1 Remake. It is the recreation of Piranha Bytes' classic RPG from 2001. That world where you start totally unarmed, nameless, inside a penal colony surrounded by a magical barrier and then have to survive, choose your side, and become a legend or a villain. If you like that atmosphere of dark fantasy, where the weight of your choices changes the whole dynamic of the world, this remake is a love letter to the past, made for the modern player. The game is being rebuilt from scratch with Unreal Engine 5, keeping the original structure, but with combat, controls, and interface totally modernized. The idea isn't just to polish the visuals, but to make the gameplay more fluid without losing the essence of the original. The world remains open from the start. You can ally with the miners faction, the bandits, or the mages, and every decision affects how NPCs treat you, which quests become available, and even how enemies behave. It is exactly the kind of game that, if you enjoyed training spells, improving skills, and discovering the world at your own pace in BG3, will give you that same feeling of organic progression and constant danger. What grabs me most in this remake is the atmosphere of a closed yet giant world, where every area has its identity and secrets. The story starts simple: prison, mines, orcs, invading the kingdom, and the king needing magical ore to continue the war. Then, with the collapse of the magical barrier, the prisoners take control of the colony and factions emerge, internal conflicts arise, and the chaos forces the player to move as a survivor, not an unbeatable hero. If you like that style of RPG where the world seems indifferent to your character and you need to prove yourself to whatever group you choose, this is exactly that in a beautiful and playable version. The combat has also been redone to be more responsive, but keeps that heavy RPG feel where mistakes have a price. You won't just shoot magic or attack fast. You'll have to choose the right moment, manage stamina, use the terrain, and take advantage of the skill system to dominate different types of enemies. And the best part is that, even while modernizing, the game is preserving the famous mechanics of the original Gothic, like the hunger and sleep systems, which force the player to think about resources and rest, not just loot and leveling.
I need allies. Allies who look out for more than their own survival. Allies who accomplish things you might have considered impossible. Allies I will meet soon enough.
Space Scum is a tactical, turn-based RPG with isometric view, where you control a squad and fight on procedurally generated planets, so no campaign turns out the same. Every planet brings different biomes, factions, enemies, and missions, and everything changes according to the path you choose to follow, which gives a vibe very similar to the freedom of approaching areas in different ways in BG3. Instead of magic, you play with firearms, explosives, energy shields, and futuristic toys that make combat very lethal. The point that most connects Space Scum with the Baldur's Gate 3 spirit is the weight of consequences. The game embraces permadeath as part of the design, so if a mercenary falls, they are gone forever. This completely changes your relationship with combat, because you start playing more with survival in mind than a perfect victory. Losing a veteran hurts, unbalances the group, and forces you to reorganize the party, which ends up generating emergent narratives very similar to those chaotic runs we remember for years. Outside of battle, the game is almost a mercenary company management simulator. You recruit new members from various backgrounds, buy and trade equipment, define who will be a melee specialist, who holds the firing line from a distance, and who goes for the more tactical role like shields, hacking, or turrets. Every mission won yields experience, new skills, and loot, and the loop becomes this addictive mix of risking your neck for more reward, something that recalls that feeling of pushing your luck in BG3 to see how far the party can hold out. And since missions and planets change with every campaign, it makes you want to restart just to test different group compositions. The universe's atmosphere is also a strong point. No clean and heroic sci-fi here, it's all much rougher, with planets that seem to hate you and encounters that are never 100% safe. Visually and thematically, it follows the Battle Brothers line in space, but with a focus on tactics and risk that fits perfectly for those who liked planning every turn in Baldur's Gate 3.